Hey, it's Vas here from Metro Hobbies, and today we're going to be showing you a quick unboxing of the Kraton 6S. Now, Arrma has just dropped the 2020 edition of the 6S cars, and as we know, the 6S cars are all very similar. They all share the same sort of platform, so we figured we'll take out the cream of the crop, which is the Kraton 6S, go through some of the features and some of the changes that they've made for the 2020 edition to kind of give you a bit of an update on what's happened with these cars. Okay, so first things first, we're going to be talking about what you get in the box with the Kraton 6S. Now, with all of these 6S cars, you are going to need to get your own batteries and charger to, of course, power up the car. You're going to need 4 AA's for the radio, and of course, either a 4S or a 6S for the cars. You can use 2 2S or 2 3S batteries as well, and then of course you need a compatible charger. So as you can see here, we have the car, we have the radio. We'll talk about the radio in a little bit, and of course we have a bag of goodies. Now, Arrma have always been very good in supplying bag with some goodies in there. You got your usual manuals and everything else, but there's also some tools and things like that. So one of the things that they have here is of course the toolkit. Now these come with Allen keys. There's some cross wrenches in here. We do, however, recommend that you do get some good quality Allen keys to work on these cars. Arrma are known to using some really good Loctite on some of these screws, especially when screwing into aluminium. So if you don't use some good quality tools, there is a chance that you can round off the stock ones. Just something to keep in mind. We also have some pistons for your shocks. Now these are really cool for those of you out there who like to tinker and tune the suspension of these cars. There's also a couple of blank pistons in here as well, which means you can actually drill them out and tune them to your liking. We also have the optional speed pinion that has always been supplied, I think pretty much since the V2s of these cars. Of course, we are now up to the V5s. And with this particular one, they've actually made a couple of changes. They've made the pinion much wider, and which means it's going to be much stronger. And it's also secured into the motor shaft via an E-clip as well to stop it from backing out. So a couple of changes that they've sort of incorporated since they released the Kraton 8S. This was something that was also available in the Kraton 8S, or introduced to us in the Kraton 8S car. But now they've also passed this on to the Kraton 6S, which is great to see. Another interesting addition that they've put into the bag of goodies are some diff shims. Now these also come with some instructions in here, and this is, I suppose, an optional thing that you can put on these cars just to shim the diffs a little bit to your liking. So really good to see Arrma actually introduce this. A lot of people have had issues with the diffs in the past and had to shim them themselves, but now Arrma are actually supplying the diffs, so good on Arrma for doing that. And then of course we've got some more useful sort of stickers. You can decorate the car to your liking. You can stick them on your toolbox, on your fridge, wherever you like to put those. And we also have a speed chart, which is something that Arrma have always incorporated since their V1s. They've got some battery dimensions, and it talks about where you should be using the pinions and that sort of terrain, and what sort of speed you'd expect out of those gears. And then of course we have the all-important manual, which I know a lot of people like to use these for bedtime reading, but it is quite useful. There's also a leaflet here regarding warranty procedures and so forth. In the manual, there are, well, actually they list a whole bunch of their cars in here. So the Notorious, the Outcast, the Typhon, you can actually see all the different parts that those cars come with as well. And you can even customize your Kraton to be something else if you want to. There's also maintenance schedules in here, so how often should you change the shock oils or check on the diffs and all that type of information. Battery sizes, and of course the typical thing about how to turn the car on, how to tune your ESCs. All of that is in here, and of course part numbers from exploded views and so forth. So if you happen to have a mishap and you need a part numbers are in here, so you can just ring up your local hobby store such as us, and say, hey, do you have part 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, and go from there. So that's everything that you get in the box with the Arrma 6S cars. Right, now onto the remote. This one is a big deal with these particular cars because the previous cars, the V4s, they came with the STX2, which is this guy over here. And unfortunately, this guy was very well featured. It had a lot of cool functions on the radio, but the feel and the overall reliability of the radio was very much questionable, and there were quite a number of people out there that had glitches and delays and things like that that happened with their cars. Not everybody had this problem, but some people did, and a lot of the times people were kind of encouraged to swap out the radio. So with the new one, all of those problems have pretty much gone away. Not only is the radio a little bit more compact, better designed, and feels better in the hand, but it now comes with a nice foam wheel. The wheel has a much better feel to it. The trigger feels a little bit more weighted, which is something that you kind of want to have that kind of feedback from a car that is as powerful and as fast as these are. And it still comes very well featured as well. So you still have steering dual rates, you still have your throttle trim, your steering trim. There's also a third button down here just where your thumb is, which is a third channel. That's currently not in use, but you can make use of that later on if you wish. And you have your speed limiter on the back here as well, and then of course you've got your throttle and steering reverse switches along with a little power button just hidden away on the side. There's no collapsible antennas or anything like that for you to break off, which is great. Runs on the standard 4AA's, and this is a great improvement, a very welcome improvement, I think, for a lot of the Arrma fans out there that wanted a better radio than the SDX2 that came in previous versions. So now this comes with the SLT3, which is great to see. All right, so now for the meaty part of this unboxing, which is of course the car itself. So we'll start with the body. The body hasn't really changed from the V4s. It is the same design, same livery, and same thickness as the previous body on the V4s. It does have the body pins tethered onto the body, which I think is something that Arrma have been doing now for a couple of years. So a really well designed body. I figured, you know, if it's not broken, no need to fix it. So they've kept that the same. As we move on to the internals, you can see that there's quite a number of changes here. Where before these cars used to come with the BLX 185 system, they now come with the firmer 150 amp system, and it has a Spectrum motor. Now the motor is the same size and specs as the previous motor, so it is a 4074 2050 kV brushless motor. The ESC is still 150 amp, but is now Spectrum firmer, and they've also added a little cap pack on the ESC as well. The cap pack does help with cogging at lower speeds because it kind of retains a little bit of voltage in that cap pack, so really nice to see that. And of course we've got our IC5 connectors. These are great if you're going to be using the Spectrum batteries and you're going to have a radio such as the DX5C hooked up to this car. You'll actually get voltage telemetry back to your radio, so you'll know exactly how much voltage you have on these batteries as you're running the car just by glancing at your radio, which is a really cool feature. Of course we have the stock pinion now, comes with a little E-clip already mounted on the motor shaft. The steering servo is also different, so they've now gone with a Spectrum steering servo, which is about 19.5 kilograms as opposed to the previous one, which was about 15 kilograms. So they're claiming to be about, I think they said something around about 30-something% faster, or rather more powerful. Really good to see an improvement on the steering servo. I know that there's been quite a number of Arrma users out there that have had issues with the old Arrma servos. Hopefully this Spectrum one will resolve that problem and we won't see any more of those issues going forward. We've also got some beefed up A-arms. So these A-arms on these cars were actually first seen on the Kraton EXB that released almost 6 months ago now. And they've now brought these A-arms onto the Kraton 6S line, or rather just the standard 6S line on the Arrma cars. And you'll see this across, not just on the Kraton, but also on the Notorious, and even the Typhon 6S have all got beefed up HD arms, which is a really good thing to see. These will obviously have a lot less flex, and they'll have you know, much stronger sort of resilience to impacts and so forth. So nice to see that. A new redesigned receiver box as well. This will give you a little bit of extra room for those of you out there who want to use different receivers, perhaps a third-party company. It's more kind of contoured to the shape of the car, so a little bit more room. Great to see that improvement as well. Battery tray has not changed. What has changed though is the chassis. They now introduced a couple of ridges on the underside of the chassis. This stiffens up the rear end of the chassis, and it's also been widened a little bit further out towards the rear. So where before the chassis would start tapering towards the rear diff a little bit early, now it tapers a little bit later, and they've added these ridges on the back to stiffen it up a little bit, hopefully preventing the chassis from having you know, any sort of bending issues or even giving it less flex. Another thing they've done as well is the Safe D little cap that they put on the center drive shafts in the rear, and I believe that is also in the front. Yes, it's also in the front diff. So that will stop the dog bones from popping out or the actual outdrive cups from backing out as well. One of the other things they've changed is the rear shock tower. Previous rear shock towers were actually quite wide, and when you have something that sticks out as far as it does, it kind of lends itself to having more leverage on impacts to bending that aluminium shock tower. Now the shock towers are 5mm already, they're pretty tough as they are, but when you extend it out that little bit more, it kind of makes it more susceptible to bending. Arrma have addressed that. They've changed the geometry of the rear suspension and they've given us a much better designed rear shock tower. Again, a design taken from the Kraton EXB. Now the EXB does come with CNC machined shock towers, which are a little bit stronger. These are still pressed aluminium, but it should still be stronger than the previous versions without a doubt. And then of course you've got your tower-to-tower brace here that you can see the big red rod going right along the middle of the chassis, and that is pretty much it as far as I could tell on this car. I think the rear wing mount is all pretty much the same. The shocks and suspension feel sublime. Arrma have always been very good at tuning their suspension, so they've always done a good job on that. Tires are the same as the previous version, so nothing has changed here. And that's pretty much everything that you kind of need to know regarding the Kraton 6S. And as I said, a lot of this will carry over to the other models on the 6S line for the 2020 edition of the Arrma cars. Okay, so that concludes our unboxing of the Kraton 6S. Now, if you have any further questions or comments, please be sure to leave them in the comment section down below. Or check out the video description where we'll have links in there to the Arrma website as well as our own Metro Hobbies website where you can order one of these. Or you can also call us here at the store where I'll be happy to take your calls and questions and we can discuss the cars in more detail. That is it for me, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and I'll be speaking to you all next time.